Welcome to today's episode of History Reimagined, where we explore the moments that forever altered the course of human civilization. Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning, but the world is different. There are no wheels anywhere, no cars, no bicycles, no shopping carts. You cannot cook your breakfast because fire doesn't exist. Your smartphone is useless because there's no written language to create the code that runs it. The clothes on your back have vanished because no human ever learned to make fabric. Even your ability to think in complex ways is diminished because language itself never evolved beyond grunts and gestures. This isn't science fiction. This is what human existence looked like for most of our species' history. For over 200,000 years, anatomically modern humans wandered the earth with remarkable potential locked inside their minds, waiting for the right spark, the right discovery, the right moment of brilliance to change everything. What transformed us from scattered bands of hunter-gatherers into the dominant species that would eventually reach the moon, split atoms, and connect every corner of the globe? The answer lies in a handful of revolutionary inventions so fundamental, so transformative, that they didn't just change how we live. They changed what it means to be human. Today, we'll journey back through time to witness the moments when everything changed. From the first spark that conquered darkness to the symbols that captured human thought, these are the inventions that built civilization itself. These are the discoveries that separated us from every other species on Earth and set us on an unstoppable path toward the modern world. Chapter 1. Mastering Fire. Picture this scene. It's 400,000 years ago in a cave in what is now Israel. A group of early humans huddled together as darkness falls, their eyes reflecting the wild fear that every creature knows when night brings predators and cold. Then, something extraordinary happens. One of them tends a small flame, not a natural wildfire, but fire under human control. For the first time in Earth's history, a species has bent one of nature's most powerful forces to its will. The control of fire by early humans was a critical technology enabling the evolution of humans. Fire provided a source of warmth and lighting, protection from predators, especially at night, a way to create more advanced hunting tools, and a method for cooking food. But this seemingly simple discovery would trigger changes so profound that some scientists argue it represents the single most important moment in human evolution. The journey to controlled fire likely began with opportunism. Early humans would have encountered natural fires caused by lightning, volcanic activity, or spontaneous combustion. Initially, they probably learned to maintain existing flames rather than create new ones. Imagine the first human who decided to carry a burning branch from a lightning-struck tree back to their shelter. That person didn't just transport fire, they transported the future of our species. Archaeological evidence suggests that claims for the earliest definitive evidence of control of fire by a member of Homo range from 1.7 to 2.0 million years ago, though the timeline remains hotly debated among scientists. What's undisputed is the revolutionary impact once humans mastered this technology. Fire transformed every aspect of human existence in ways both obvious and subtle. The most immediate benefit was protection. Before fire, humans were vulnerable to predators throughout the night. Our ancestors lacked the natural weapons of fangs, claws, or venomous bites. They couldn't outrun most predators or overpower them through brute strength. But fire changed the equation entirely. A burning torch or campfire created a barrier that even the largest predators respected. For the first time, humans could claim territory and defend it not through physical prowess, but through technology. Warmth came next, and with it, geographic expansion. Fire allowed early humans to survive in colder climates and extend their range far beyond the warm savannas of Africa. This expansion would prove crucial to human development, as different environments presented new challenges that drove innovation and adaptation. Without fire, humans might never have migrated across the globe. remaining a regional species confined to limited habitats. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of fire control was cooking. Before the advent of fire, the hominid diet was limited to mostly plant parts composed of simple sugars and carbohydrates such as seeds, flowers, and fleshy fruits. Parts of the plant such as stems, mature leaves, enlarged roots, and tubers would have been inaccessible as a food source due to the indigestibility of raw cellulose and starch. Cooking unlocked a nutritional revolution. Cooked food is easier to chew and digest, meaning humans could extract more calories and nutrients from the same amount of food. This efficiency boost freed up energy that had previously been devoted to digestion and made it available for other purposes like growing larger brains. Some scientists propose that cooking directly enabled the evolution of human intelligence by providing the extra calories necessary to fuel our energy-hungry brains. The social implications were equally profound. Fire created gathering points where early humans would come together each evening. Around these flames, our ancestors shared food, told stories, passed down knowledge, and developed the complex social bonds that would become the foundation of human culture. The campfire became humanity's first classroom, laboratory, and social network all rolled into one. Fire also enabled the creation of new tools and technologies. Heat treatment made stone tools sharper and more durable. Fire was used in the creation of art. Archaeologists have discovered several 1 to 10-inch Venus figurine statues in Europe, dating to the Paleolithic. Several carved from stone and ivory, others shaped from clay and then fired. These are some of the earliest examples of ceramics. Fire transformed clay into pottery, metals into tools, and sand into glass, launching humanity's relationship with material science. The psychological impact cannot be underestimated. Fire represented humanity's first real victory over nature's forces. It demonstrated that humans could not merely adapt to their environment, but actively reshape it. This realization may have sparked the innovative mindset that would drive all future technological development. Fire also extended the usable day. Before controlled fire, human activity was largely limited to daylight hours. Fire pushed back the darkness, creating additional time for social interaction, tool-making, and cultural development. This extension of active time accelerated the pace of human progress in ways that compounded over generations. As fire use spread and became more sophisticated, it enabled increasingly complex activities. Early humans learned to use fire for hunting, creating controlled burns to drive game toward waiting hunters. They used smoke for preservation, creating the first stored food supplies that could sustain communities through lean times. Fire became central to rituals and ceremonies, playing a role in the development of early religious and spiritual practices. The mastery of fire represents humanity's first great leap toward civilization. It established the pattern that would define our species, the use of technology to overcome natural limitations. From that first controlled flame to the nuclear power plants of today, humans have been harnessing energy to reshape the world around us. Without fire, there would be no metallurgy, no ceramics, no steam engines, no industrial revolution. Every subsequent technological advancement can trace its lineage back to that first spark controlled by human hands. Fire didn't just change how early humans lived. It changed what was possible for our species to become. Chapter 2. Stone Implements. In the African savanna, 2.6 million years ago, an early human ancestor faced a problem that would have defeated any other creature. A marrow-rich bone lay before them, its life-giving nutrients locked inside by nature's own armor. But instead of walking away defeated, this individual did something unprecedented in the history of life on Earth. They picked up one stone and deliberately struck it against another, creating a sharp edge where none had existed before. In that moment, humanity took its first step toward becoming masters of technology. the earliest stone tool-making developed by at least 2.6 million years ago. The early Stone Age began with the most basic stone implements made by early humans. These old iron toolkits include hammerstones, stone cores, and sharp stone flakes. This might seem primitive by today's standards, but these first stone tools represented a cognitive revolution that set our lineage apart from every other species on the planet. The Old Iron Toolkit, named after Tanzania's Olduvai Gorge, where many examples were first discovered, consisted of three basic elements: hammerstones that show battering from repeated use stone cores from which flakes had been systematically removed, and the sharp flakes themselves, humanity's first cutting implements. These cores were river pebbles, or rocks similar to them, that had been struck by a spherical hammerstone to cause conchoidal fractures, removing flakes from one surface, creating an edge and often a sharp tip. The creation of these tools required remarkable foresight and planning. The toolmaker had to visualize the desired end result, select appropriate raw materials, and execute a series of precise strikes to achieve their goal. This process demanded not just manual dexterity, but abstract thinking, the ability to see potential where others saw only stone. Archaeological evidence suggests that all four Old Iron knapping techniques can be invented by knapping naive participants, and that the resulting Old Iron tools were used by the experimental participants, effectively indicating that while the skill was learnable, its original discovery represented a profound cognitive leap. The impact of stone tools on human evolution cannot be overstated. These implements effectively gave early humans claws and fangs that could be crafted to any specification. A sharp stone flake could slice through hide that human fingernails couldn't scratch. It could butcher carcasses, strip bark, dig roots, and perform countless other tasks that expanded the range of available food sources and survival strategies. Access to better nutrition through improved food processing capabilities likely accelerated human brain development. Meat became a more significant part of the human diet, providing proteins and fats essential for neural growth. The ability to process tough plant materials opened up previously inaccessible food sources. Stone tools didn't just help humans eat better, they helped create the conditions for becoming smarter. As millennia passed, stone tool technology became increasingly sophisticated. By about 1.76 million years ago, early humans began to make Acheulean hand axes and other large cutting tools. The Acheulean hand axe, with its distinctive teardrop shape and carefully crafted symmetry, required extraordinary skill to produce. Paleolithic hand axes were teardrop-shaped stone tools with two sharpened edges that met at a point. In one method, they were made by roughly chipping away flakes from the edges with a hammer and then sharpening the edges by chipping away smaller flakes. These hand axes weren't just functional tools. They were works of art. The symmetry and elegance of their design suggest that early humans had developed an aesthetic sense, appreciating beauty alongside utility. Some hand axes show such perfect symmetry that they could only have been created by individuals with exceptional skill and artistic vision. This indicates that toolmaking had evolved from mere survival necessity into a specialized craft, possibly the world's first profession. The Middle Stone Age brought even greater innovation. By 200,000 years ago, the pace of innovation in stone technology began to accelerate. Middle Stone Age toolkits included points, which could be hafted onto shafts to make spears, stone awls, which could have been used to perforate hides, and scrapers that were useful in preparing hide, wood, and other materials. This technological acceleration coincided with the emergence of anatomically modern humans. The sophistication of Middle Stone Age tools suggested that our direct ancestors possessed cognitive abilities essentially identical to our own. They could plan complex sequences of actions, solve technical problems, and innovate solutions to environmental challenges. The hafting of stone points onto wooden shafts represented another crucial breakthrough. This composite tool technology required multiple materials, careful planning, and complex assembly. Creating an effective hafted spear demanded knowledge of wood properties, adhesives, binding techniques, and tool design. The finished product was far more effective than either component, alone a principle that would drive technological development throughout human history. Stone tool technology also facilitated the development of other crucial innovations. Sharp stone implements made it possible to work wood effectively, leading to advances in shelter construction, tool handles, and eventually boats. Stone scrapers enabled the processing of animal hides into clothing and shelter materials. Stone awls allowed for the perforation of materials, enabling sewing and more sophisticated construction techniques. The geographic spread of stone tool traditions provides insights into early human migration and cultural transmission. Similar tool types found across vast distances suggest either widespread migration of tool-making peoples or the transmission of technological knowledge between groups. Either way, stone tools played a crucial role in human expansion across the globe. Regional variations in stone tool traditions also reveal the beginnings of cultural diversity. Different groups developed distinct styles and techniques, creating the first technological signatures that marked different human communities. This diversification laid the groundwork for the rich variety of human cultures that would emerge in later millennia. The psychological impact of stone tool mastery was profound. These implements gave humans confidence in their ability to solve problems through technology. Each successful tool creation reinforced the idea that human ingenuity could overcome natural limitations. This mindset would prove crucial as humans faced increasingly complex challenges in their expansion across diverse environments. Stone tools also democratized capabilities within human groups. While not everyone could be equally skilled at toolmaking, even basic implements could dramatically enhance an individual's effectiveness. This technological augmentation of human capabilities helped smaller, weaker individuals contribute meaningfully to group survival, promoting cooperation and social cohesion. The longevity of stone tool use, spanning over 2.5 million years, testifies to the fundamental importance of this technology. Even as humans developed more sophisticated materials and techniques, stone remained central to human technology until relatively recent times. In many parts of the world, stone tools continued to be used alongside metal implements well into the historical period. The legacy of stone tool technology extends far beyond its practical applications. The cognitive skills developed through tool-making, spatial reasoning, planning, problem-solving, and fine motor control became fundamental aspects of human intelligence. The patient, methodical approach required for successful stone knapping may have helped develop the persistence and attention to detail that characterize human learning and innovation. Stone tools represent humanity's first great technological triumph, but more importantly, they established the pattern that would define our species: the systematic use of technology to enhance human capabilities and overcome environmental challenges. From those first sharp flakes struck from stone cores to the quantum computers of today, humans have been augmenting their natural abilities through carefully crafted tools. Chapter 3: The Agricultural Revolution. 12,000 years ago, in the fertile hills of the Levant, a woman knelt beside a patch of wild wheat. But instead of simply gathering the grain, as her ancestors had done for thousands of generations, she did something revolutionary. She saved some of the best seeds and deliberately planted them near her settlement. This simple act, the conscious cultivation of crops, would trigger the most profound transformation in human history since the control of fire. The agricultural revolution, also known as the Neolithic Revolution, didn't happen overnight. Archaeological data indicate that the domestication of various types of plants and animals happened in separate locations worldwide. Starting in the geological epoch of the Holocene, 11,700 years ago, after the end of the last ice age, this timing wasn't coincidental. The end of the ice age created more stable, predictable climates that made agriculture feasible for the first time in human history. For the previous 200,000 years of human existence, our ancestors had lived as hunter-gatherers, moving constantly in search of food, their lives dictated by the rhythms of nature. Population sizes remained small and relatively stable, limited by the carrying capacity of natural ecosystems. Then, in a span of just a few thousand years, everything changed. The Neolithic Revolution occurred first in those parts of the world with an unusual combination of qualities: a warm climate, encouraging rapid crop growth, and an annual cycle of flooding that naturally regenerated the fertility of the land. The great river valleys of Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus River, and China became humanity's first laboratories for this new way of life. The transition to agriculture required a fundamental shift in human thinking. Instead of simply taking what nature provided, early farmers had to imagine future outcomes and plan accordingly. They had to save seeds during times of plenty for planting during appropriate seasons. They had to develop new tools for cultivation, harvesting, and food processing. Most importantly, they had to commit to staying in one place long enough to see their efforts bear fruit. The package of innovations that came with agriculture was remarkable in its scope. These societies radically modified their natural environment by means of specialized food crop cultivation, with activities such as irrigation and deforestation, which allowed the production of surplus food. Other developments that are found very widely during this era are the domestication of animals, pottery, polished stone tools, and rectangular houses. Agriculture didn't just change what humans ate. It transformed how they thought, lived, and organized themselves. The ability to produce surplus food meant that not everyone had to be directly involved in food production. For the first time in human history, specialization became possible. Some individuals could focus entirely on toolmaking, others on pottery, still others on trade or governance. This division of labor accelerated technological and social development at an unprecedented pace. The domestication of plants required careful observation and selection over many generations. Early farmers had to identify which individual plants produced the best yields, which ripened at optimal times, and which possessed other desirable characteristics. Wild grains have been collected and eaten from at least 105,000 years ago, and possibly much longer. Exact dates are hard to determine, as people collected and ate seeds before domesticating them, and plant characteristics may have changed during this period without human selection. The transformation of wild plants into domestic crops involved fundamental changes in plant biology. Wild grains naturally scatter their seeds when ripe, but farmers preferred plants that held their seeds until harvest time. Through unconscious selection, consistently choosing plants with the desired characteristics, early farmers gradually bred crops that were entirely dependent on human intervention for reproduction. This coevolution between humans and plants created partnerships that would define civilization. Animal domestication followed similar patterns, but presented additional challenges. The natives controlled fire on a regional scale to create a low-intensity fire ecology which prevented larger, catastrophic fires and sustained a low-density agriculture in loose rotation, a sort of wild permaculture. Early herders had to understand animal behavior, breeding patterns, and nutritional needs. They developed techniques for selective breeding that enhanced desirable traits while maintaining healthy populations. The benefits of domesticated animals extended far beyond meat production. Cattle, sheep, and goats provided milk, expanding the human diet and providing reliable protein sources. Animals also provided raw materials: hides for clothing and shelter, bones for tools, and wool for textiles. Draft animals like oxen and horses would eventually revolutionize transportation and field cultivation. However, the agricultural revolution came with significant costs. The Neolithic Revolution greatly narrowed the diversity of foods available. resulting in a decrease in the quality of human nutrition compared with that obtained previously from foraging. Dependence on a limited number of staple crops made early farming communities vulnerable to crop failures, diseases, and pests. Archaeological evidence suggests that early farmers were generally shorter and less healthy than their hunter-gatherer predecessors. The social implications of agriculture were equally complex. The ability to accumulate and store surplus food led to the emergence of social hierarchies and inequality. Those who controlled the best agricultural land or possessed superior farming knowledge could accumulate wealth and power. This concentration of resources enabled some individuals to pursue non-agricultural activities, leading to the emergence of priests, rulers, and craftspeople. Permanent settlements required new forms of social organization. With larger groups living in close proximity, early farmers had to develop systems for resolving conflicts, allocating resources, and coordinating group activities. These challenges drove the development of governance structures, legal systems, and social institutions that would form the foundation of civilization. The environmental impact of agriculture was immediate and profound. These societies radically modified their natural environment by means of specialized food crop cultivation, with activities such as irrigation and deforestation which allowed the production of surplus food. Forests were cleared for farmland, waterways were diverted for irrigation, and entire ecosystems were transformed to serve human needs. This marked the beginning of humanity's role as a major geological force capable of reshaping the planet. Regional variations in agricultural development created diverse cultural traditions that persist today. A system of companion planting called the Three Sisters was developed in North America. 3 crops that complemented each other were planted together: winter squash, maize, corn, and climbing beans, typically tepary beans or common beans. This sophisticated system demonstrated deep ecological knowledge and sustainable farming practices. The technological innovations accompanying agriculture were remarkable. New tools had to be developed for planting, cultivation, and harvesting. Digging sticks and the first crude plow stone sickles querns that ground grain by friction between 2 stones, and most complicated of all irrigation techniques for keeping the ground watered and fertile. All these became well established in the great subtropical river valleys of Egypt and Mesopotamia in the millennia before 3000 BCE. Food processing and storage became critical skills. Grain needed to be threshed, winnowed, ground into flour, and protected from spoilage. These activities required specialized tools, facilities, and knowledge. The development of granaries and other storage facilities marked humanity's first systematic efforts to manage resources across seasons and years. The agricultural revolution also catalyzed population growth on an unprecedented scale. The adoption of agriculture by prehistoric societies caused episodes of rapid population growth, a phenomenon known as the Neolithic demographic transition. Reliable food supplies could support much larger communities than hunting and gathering. Villages grew into towns, towns into cities, and cities into the first great civilizations. The psychological transformation was equally significant. Agriculture required long-term thinking and delayed gratification on a scale previously unknown to humans. Farmers had to work for months before seeing the results of their efforts. They had to plan for seasonal variations and prepare for potential difficulties. This extended time horizon fundamentally changed how humans thought about the future and their place in the world. The spread of agricultural knowledge created humanity's first information networks. Techniques, crops, and innovations spread along trade routes, through migration, and via cultural exchange. This sharing of agricultural knowledge accelerated development and enabled rapid adaptation to local conditions. The agricultural revolution represents more than just a change in food production. It was the foundation upon which all subsequent human civilization was built. Without agriculture, there would be no cities, No writing, no complex technologies, no art or literature as we know them. The surplus food and specialized labor made possible by farming created the conditions for every other human achievement. From that first planted seed to today's high-tech farming operations, agriculture has remained central to human civilization. The innovations of the Neolithic farmers, selective breeding, irrigation, food storage, and livestock management remain fundamental to feeding our modern world. The agricultural revolution didn't just change how humans obtained food. It changed what it meant to be human, setting our species on the path toward the complex, interconnected world we inhabit today. Chapter 4. The Wheel. In the workshops of ancient Sumer, around 3500 BCE, a potter sat before a mound of clay, frustrated by the tedious process of shaping vessels by hand. Then, inspiration struck. What if the clay could be made to turn while remaining stationary? What if circular motion could be harnessed to create perfect symmetry? The potter's wheel, humanity's first practical use of the wheel, was about to revolutionize not just pottery making, but the entire trajectory of human civilization. The wheel was invented in the 4th century BC in Lower Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, where the Sumerian people inserted rotating axles into solid discs of wood. It was only in 2000 BC that the discs began to be hollowed out to make a lighter wheel. But this seemingly simple circular device would prove to be one of the most transformative inventions in human history, ranking alongside fire and agriculture in its revolutionary impact. The wheel's emergence wasn't accidental. It was the product of a sophisticated civilization that had already mastered numerous complex technologies. The Sumerians had developed writing, mathematics, and urban planning. They had constructed elaborate irrigation systems and monumental architecture. Yet even in this technologically advanced society, the wheel represented a breakthrough that would change everything. Understanding why the wheel was so revolutionary requires appreciating the immense technical challenges its creation presented. The stroke of brilliance was the wheel and axle concept, but then making it was also difficult. For instance, the holes at the center of the wheels and the ends of the fixed axles had to be nearly perfectly round and smooth. The size of the axle was also a critical factor, as was its snugness inside the hole, not too tight, but not too loose either. The engineering precision required was extraordinary for its time. Ancient craftsmen had to create perfectly round wheels using only hand tools. The axles needed to be straight and uniform. The bearing surfaces where wheel met axle required smoothing to reduce friction. Each component had to be carefully fitted to create a functional whole. This level of technical sophistication represented centuries of gradual refinement and innovation. Archaeological evidence suggests that the earliest wheels were solid discs cut from tree trunks or constructed from planks held together with crosspieces. These early wheels were heavy and crude, but they worked. Over time, wheelwrights developed increasingly sophisticated designs. Spoked wheels, which wouldn't appear until around 2000 BCE, represented another major breakthrough, dramatically reducing weight while maintaining strength. The wheel's first applications were in pottery making and transportation, but its impact quickly spread throughout Sumerian society. The way people lived and worked changed when the wheel was invented. Crops could be transported to markets more easily by farmers. Builders could carry stones and bricks for large structures. Soldiers could move faster on chariots during battles. Traders could travel farther with their goods, spreading products and ideas from one region to another. The transportation revolution unleashed by the wheel cannot be overstated. Before wheeled vehicles, humans and pack animals could carry only limited loads over difficult terrain. A person might carry 30 to 40 pounds while walking. A donkey could manage perhaps 100 pounds. But a simple cart pulled by the same donkey could transport several hundred pounds with less effort. This multiplication of carrying capacity transformed commerce, warfare, and daily life. Trade networks expanded dramatically as merchants could transport goods over longer distances and in larger quantities. Wheeled carts facilitated agriculture and commerce by enabling the transportation of goods to and from markets, as well as easing the burdens of people traveling great distances. Markets grew larger and more diverse as products from distant regions became accessible. This increased trade fostered cultural exchange and technological diffusion across vast distances. Agricultural productivity soared as farmers could transport heavier loads of grain, tools, and supplies. Fields farther from settlements became practical to cultivate. Seasonal migrations of livestock became easier to manage. The surplus production enabled by improved transportation contributed to population growth and urbanization. Military applications of the wheel proved equally transformative. War chariots gave armies unprecedented mobility and shock capability. Soldiers could move faster on chariots during battles. These early armored vehicles changed battlefield tactics and enabled the rise of professional military classes. Chariots became symbols of power and prestige, featuring prominently in royal iconography and religious ceremonies. The wheel's influence on construction was revolutionary. Builders could carry stones and bricks for large structures. Massive construction projects that would have been impossible or prohibitively expensive became feasible. The great cities of Mesopotamia, with their towering ziggurats and extensive walls, owed their existence partly to wheeled transport that could move building materials efficiently. But the wheel's impact extended far beyond its immediate practical applications. This innovation led to major advances in two main areas. First, transport. The wheel began to be used on carts and battle chariots. Second, and more importantly, it contributed to the mechanization of agriculture, animal traction, crop irrigation, and craft industries. For example, the centrifugal force of the wheel is the basic mechanism in windmills. The mechanical principles embodied in the wheel became fundamental to countless later inventions. Gears, pulleys, and rotating machinery all derive from insights first developed for wheeled vehicles. Water wheels and windmills harnessed natural forces using circular motion. The potter's wheel demonstrated how rotational motion could create perfect symmetry and uniform products. The wheel also played a crucial role in the development of measurement and mathematics. Creating functional wheels required understanding concepts of circularity, diameter, and circumference. Wheel makers had to develop techniques for measuring and marking precise angles. The relationship between wheel diameter and travel distance contributed to early understanding of mathematical ratios and geometry. Interestingly, the wheel's absence in certain advanced civilizations highlights its specific environmental and cultural requirements. The wheel-less people of Rapa Nui, Easter Island, for example, transported and erected their towering moai statues less than 1,000 years ago. The Americas developed sophisticated civilizations without using the wheel for transportation, though they understood the principle and used it for toys and ceremonial objects. This selective adoption suggests that the wheel's revolutionary potential could only be realized under specific conditions. Suitable terrain for wheeled transport, appropriate draft animals, and established trade networks all contributed to the wheel's success in Eurasia and its limited impact elsewhere. The social implications of wheeled transportation were profound. Improved mobility facilitated cultural exchange and intermarriage between distant communities. Professional traders emerged as specialists in long-distance commerce. Road networks developed to accommodate wheeled traffic, creating the infrastructure for later empires. Standardization became important as wheels, axles, and carts needed to be compatible across regions. The wheel also democratized transportation to some extent. While owning a cart and draft animal required resources, wheeled transport was more accessible than maintaining large numbers of pack animals. Small-scale farmers and craftsmen could participate in regional markets previously dominated by wealthy merchants with extensive pack trains. The psychological impact of the wheel was equally significant. Rolling motion seemed to defy natural laws. Objects moved without visible effort. Loads that seemed impossible for humans to carry rolled along smoothly behind animals. This demonstration of mechanical advantage reinforced the idea that human ingenuity could overcome physical limitations. The wheel established patterns of innovation that would characterize human technological development. It demonstrated the power of applying scientific principles to practical problems. The gradual refinement from crude solid discs to sophisticated spoked wheels showed how incremental improvements could yield dramatic advances over time. Regional variations in wheel design reflected local conditions and cultural preferences. Egyptian wheels differed from Mesopotamian ones, which differed from those developed in Central Asia. These variations drove further innovation as traders and craftsmen encountered different designs and adapted the best features for their own use. The wheel's longevity as a technology testifies to its fundamental importance. Unlike many ancient inventions that became obsolete, the wheel remains central to modern technology. From bicycle wheels to turbine rotors, from car tires to computer hard drives, circular motion continues to power our technological civilization. The environmental impact of wheeled transportation began humanity's systematic modification of landscapes for technological purposes. Roads were built, bridges constructed, and terrain leveled to accommodate wheeled traffic. These early infrastructure projects established precedents for the large-scale environmental modifications that characterize modern civilization. The wheel represents more than just a mechanical device. It embodies humanity's capacity to observe natural phenomena, abstract underlying principles, and apply them to create tools that transcend biological limitations. From the first potter's wheel in ancient Sumer to the wheels that carry space rovers across alien planets, this simple circular form continues to roll humanity toward new frontiers. The invention of the wheel marked a crucial transition in human development. It demonstrated that mechanical principles could be harnessed systematically to augment human capabilities. This insight would drive the development of increasingly sophisticated machines, ultimately leading to the Industrial Revolution and the technological world we inhabit today. In those first turns of a primitive wheel, humanity glimpsed a mechanical future that would define our species' relationship with the physical world. Chapter 5. The Origin of Language. In the depths of a prehistoric cave, perhaps 135,000 years ago, something unprecedented occurred. A human being opened their mouth and produced not just a grunt or cry, but a structured sequence of sounds that carried specific meaning, sounds that another human could understand, remember, and reproduce. In that moment, when the first true words were spoken, humanity crossed an invisible threshold that separated us forever from every other species on Earth. A new survey of genomic evidence suggests our unique language capacity was present at least 135,000 years ago. Subsequently, language might have entered social use 100,000 years ago. But this timeline, while supported by genetic evidence, only hints at the magnitude of what occurred when human language first emerged. Language isn't just communication. Many species communicate through sounds, gestures, and chemical signals. What makes human language unique is its infinite generative capacity. With a finite set of sounds, we can create an unlimited number of meanings. We can discuss things that don't exist, events that happened in the distant past, or possibilities that might occur in the far future. We can build abstract concepts, tell stories, and transmit complex knowledge across generations. The emergence of language represents perhaps the most profound cognitive revolution in the history of life on Earth. The mystery of how language originated has fascinated scholars for millennia. The search for the origin of language has a long history in mythology. Most mythologies do not credit humans with the invention of language, but speak of a divine language predating human language. But scientific inquiry suggests a more gradual, evolutionary process, one that required unprecedented changes in human anatomy, cognition, and social organization. The anatomical prerequisites for speech were crucial. Human vocal tracts differ significantly from those of our closest relatives. Our larynx sits lower in the throat, creating a larger resonance chamber that allows for more complex sound production. Our tongues are more flexible and precise. Our breathing patterns adapted to support extended vocalizations. These physical changes didn't happen overnight. They represent millions of years of gradual evolution that prepared our species for the language revolution. But anatomy alone wasn't enough. The cognitive requirements for language are staggering. Human brains had to develop the capacity for symbolic thinking, the ability to let arbitrary sounds represent specific concepts. They had to master complex grammar systems that could combine words in meaningful patterns. Most remarkably, they had to develop theory of mind, the understanding that other individuals have thoughts, beliefs, and intentions that might differ from our own. According to the Tata theory, humans made the earliest words by tongue movements that mimic manual gestures, rendering them audible. This gestural origin theory suggests that language evolved from a pre-existing system of hand signals. Early humans may have used gestures to coordinate hunting, signal danger, or share information about food sources. Gradually, vocalizations accompanied these gestures, eventually replacing them entirely. The social pressures driving language evolution were immense. As human groups grew larger and more complex, the need for sophisticated communication became critical. Coordinating group hunts required precise information sharing. Managing conflicts within communities demanded nuanced negotiation. Transmitting knowledge about toolmaking, food sources, and survival techniques across generations required reliable communication systems. Language didn't emerge in isolation. It co-evolved with other uniquely human capabilities. The development of more complex tools coincided with language expansion, as techniques for making and using implements required detailed instruction. Art and symbolism appeared alongside language development, suggesting that symbolic thinking enabled both linguistic and artistic expression. The timing of language emergence remains contentious among researchers. Based on what the genomics data indicate about the geographic dispersal of human populations, scientists can infer when different groups separated and began developing distinct languages. Every population branching across the globe has human language, and all languages are related. This suggests that language capacity existed before human populations spread across the world. The archaeological record provides tantalizing clues about early language use. Roughly 100,000 years ago, the evidence shows there was a widespread appearance of symbolic activity, from meaningful markings on objects to the use of fire to produce ochre, a decorative red color. Like our complex, highly generative language, these symbolic activities are engaged in by people and no other creatures. The creation and use of symbolic objects suggests that humans had developed abstract thinking capabilities necessary for language. Creating a symbolic marking requires understanding that one thing can represent another, the same cognitive leap necessary for words to represent concepts. The appearance of deliberate burials with grave goods around this time also suggests that humans could communicate about abstract concepts like death, afterlife, and social status. Trade networks spanning hundreds of miles appear in the archaeological record around the same time, suggesting that humans could communicate complex information about distant resources, navigation routes, and social relationships. Such networks would have been impossible without sophisticated language systems capable of transmitting detailed, accurate information across multiple groups and generations. The diversity of human languages today provides insights into early language development. Despite surface differences, all human languages share fundamental structural similarities. Every language has nouns and verbs, ways to ask questions, methods for negation, and systems for indicating relationships between concepts. These universal features suggest that language capacity is deeply embedded in human biology, rather than being purely cultural. Children's language acquisition offers another window into language origins. Human children learn language with remarkable consistency across cultures, following similar developmental stages regardless of the specific language they are learning. This suggests that humans possess innate language learning capabilities that evolved specifically for this purpose. No other species demonstrates comparable language learning ability, even when raised in human environments. The social functions of early language extended far beyond practical communication. Language enabled the development of cultural traditions, religious beliefs, and shared narratives that bound communities together. Storytelling became a means of preserving and transmitting knowledge, values, and identity across generations. Songs and chants created group cohesion and facilitated memory of important information. Language also enabled deception and manipulation in ways previously impossible. For the first time, individuals could lie convincingly about events others hadn't witnessed. They could make promises about future behavior or create elaborate fictional scenarios. This capacity for deception, while potentially destructive, also enabled sophisticated social strategies, diplomacy, and creative problem-solving. The development of names for individuals marked another crucial milestone. Once humans could refer to specific people who weren't physically present, they could discuss relationships, plan collaborative activities, and maintain social connections across time and distance. Personal names also enabled the development of reputation systems, where individuals' past actions influenced their future social standing. Counting and numerical concepts likely emerged alongside language development. The ability to discuss quantities precisely enabled more sophisticated resource management, trade agreements, and group coordination. Mathematical thinking may have co-evolved with linguistic thinking, as both require abstract symbolic manipulation. The emotional and psychological impacts of language were profound. For the first time, humans could share their inner experiences with others. They could express feelings, describe dreams, and communicate abstract thoughts. This sharing of subjective experience created unprecedented levels of empathy and social bonding, fundamentally changing the nature of human relationships. Language also enabled humans to externalize memory in ways no other species had achieved. Important information could be encoded in stories, songs, and verbal traditions that persisted across generations without physical artifacts. This cultural memory system allowed human groups to accumulate knowledge over time, building upon previous discoveries and innovations. The feedback loop between language and thought drove accelerating cognitive development. As vocabulary expanded, humans could think about increasingly complex concepts. More sophisticated thinking enabled more precise language, which in turn facilitated even more complex cognitive processes. This recursive relationship between language and cognition may explain the rapid acceleration of human cultural development following the language revolution. Regional language variations began early in human history as populations spread across different environments. Local languages adapted to describe specific ecological features, cultural practices, and environmental challenges. These linguistic adaptations created the first steps toward the rich diversity of human cultures that would characterize our species. The preservation of language through oral traditions became a crucial cultural technology. Master storytellers developed techniques for memorizing and accurately transmitting vast amounts of information through purely verbal means. These oral traditions preserved historical knowledge, technical instructions, moral teachings, and cultural values across countless generations before writing was invented. Language enabled humans to plan and coordinate activities on unprecedented scales. Group hunts could be planned in detail, with specific roles assigned to each participant. Seasonal migrations could be organized based on shared knowledge about distant resources and travel routes. Construction projects requiring multiple individuals could be coordinated through verbal instruction and planning. The emergence of specialized vocabulary reflected increasing technological sophistication. As tools became more complex, humans needed precise terms to describe different components, techniques, and applications. Technical vocabularies enabled the efficient transmission of specialized knowledge and supported the development of expert craftspeople. Language capacity existed in the Homo sapiens population 135,000 years ago, but its full social implementation likely took tens of thousands of years to develop. The gradual elaboration of grammar, vocabulary, and communicative functions transformed human society in ways that continue to shape our world today. Without language, there would be no science, no philosophy, no literature, no complex institutions. Every human achievement since the language revolution has depended on our species' unique ability to share complex ideas through structured communication. From the first words spoken in prehistoric caves to the global communications networks of today, language remains humanity's most powerful tool for creating shared understanding and coordinated action. The invention of language didn't just change how humans communicated, it changed what it meant to be human, creating the foundation for all subsequent cultural and technological development that distinguishes our species from every other form of life on Earth. Chapter 6. The Bow and Arrow. In the flickering light of a cave in South Africa, 71,000 years ago, a skilled craftsman carefully heated pieces of silkreed stone over a controlled fire. The heat treatment would make the stone easier to work, allowing for the creation of tiny, perfectly shaped points unlike anything seen before in human history. These were uncrewed spear tips or simple cutting tools. They were precision-engineered projectile points designed to fly true and strike deep when launched from humanity's newest and most revolutionary weapon, the bow and arrow. Small stone blades from South Africa dating to 71,000 years ago may be the earliest evidence of bow and arrows. The tiny blades that archaeologists found are signs of complex tool-making. The tiny tools were created from silkreed stone the people had heated over a fire to make the raw material easier to work with before chipping the rock into blades. This multi-step manufacturing process represented a quantum leap in human technological sophistication. The bow and arrow wasn't just another hunting tool. It was a complete weapon system that required unprecedented levels of planning, skill, and technological integration. Creating functional arrows demanded expertise in multiple crafts: stone knapping for points, woodworking for shafts, animal processing for fletching and binding materials, and sophisticated understanding of ballistics and aerodynamics. The cognitive demands of bow and arrow technology were extraordinary. The shape of the blades looks like the shape of arrow tips found in more recent arrows, which led researchers to conclude the blades were used in bow and arrow projectile weapons. That implies there were even more steps in the tool-making process, such as hafting the stone tips to a wooden shaft. Each component had to be manufactured to precise specifications and assembled into a functioning whole. The bow itself required deep understanding of material science. Perhaps more important than exactly when it was invented is what the bow represented. Driven by the most basic instinct, hunger, the human mind was capable of incredible technological advances. Early bow makers had to identify woods with the proper combination of flexibility and strength, understand grain patterns and seasoning requirements, and master complex construction techniques. The Holmegard bow, discovered in Denmark and dating to around 8000 BCE, demonstrates the sophistication early bow makers achieved. Close to 10 millennia ago, a bowyer somewhere in northern Europe carefully selected a narrow trunk of knot-free elm that had grown in the shade. Shaded elm wood produced a smaller and tougher grain. The wide limbs distribute the stress of drawing the bow well and reduce any chance of breakage, and the tapered limbs increase the speed imparted to the arrow. This level of material selection and engineering optimization required accumulated knowledge passed down through generations of craftsmen. The Holmegar bow was not the first of its kind. It had been developed and likely gone through 1,000s of previous iterations. It was a technical tool, likely produced by a specialist who had learned their craft from the many hundreds of bowyers and many bows that had preceded it. The revolutionary impact of bow and arrow technology on human hunting capabilities cannot be overstated. Tantalizing evidence from the Sibadu Cave in South Africa points to their invention sometime between 60,000 and 70,000 years ago. The humble bow and arrow was yet another early human invention. It provided early hunters with a safer way to engage and kill prey from a distance, thus rendering the need to get up close and personal with potentially dangerous animals unnecessary. Before the bow, human hunters had to approach prey closely enough to thrust spears or throw them at short range. This exposed hunters to significant danger from large animals and limited hunting success rates. Arrows launched from a proper bow could accurately strike targets at distances of 50 meters or more, transforming the dynamics of human predation. The invention of the bow was preceded by the atlot, a stick that gives leverage to throwing a spear or dart, and found almost everywhere across the globe. However, arrows of small diameter, in order to be functional, require very high kinetic energy, which cannot be obtained by any lever system, classical rigid thrower, or momentum, and can only be associated with a spring system like archery. The physics of archery required humans to understand and manipulate stored energy in ways no previous technology had demanded. Drawing a bowstring stores potential energy in the bent limbs, which is suddenly released when the string is loosed, converting to kinetic energy that propels the arrow. This sophisticated understanding of energy storage and transfer represented a major advance in human technical knowledge. Arrow design itself became a specialized craft requiring multiple areas of expertise. Shafts needed to be straight, properly weighted, and matched to specific bow strengths. Fletching the feathers or other materials attached to the rear of the arrow required understanding of aerodynamics and stability. Points needed to be securely attached while maintaining proper balance and penetration characteristics. The social implications of bow and arrow technology were profound. Constructing the kind of light, strong and sharp projectile points that could fit on the end of an arrow requires skill and is evidence of the cognitive capabilities of early humans. The ability to manufacture such an advanced tool is key in human evolution. The expertise required to create effective bows and arrows likely led to the emergence of specialist craftsmen within early human communities. Archery also democratized hunting effectiveness to some extent. While not everyone could become an expert archer, basic competency with bow and arrow could make even smaller, physically weaker individuals effective hunters. This expanded the number of people who could contribute to group subsistence and may have reduced the dominance of purely physical prowess in determining social status. The bow enabled people to hunt more efficiently, exploit previously unreachable land, and was likely an immense display of power. It assisted in acquiring those vital extra calories that left time for other activities like construction, domestication, and conversation. Its development was a key station on the route to civilization. The improved hunting efficiency provided by archery may have contributed to population growth and cultural development by ensuring more reliable food supplies. Warfare was transformed even more dramatically than hunting. The bow gave human groups unprecedented capabilities for long-range combat. Archers could engage enemies before they came within range of spears or clubs, fundamentally altering military tactics and strategy. The psychological impact of facing arrows flying from concealed positions must have been enormous for peoples accustomed only to close combat weapons. The technical challenges of arrow construction drove innovations in adhesives, binding techniques, and precision manufacturing. Early arrow makers developed plant-based glues, learned to work sinew and gut for bindings, and created jigs and guides for ensuring consistent arrow specifications. These techniques would later be applied to other composite tools and construction projects. Regional variations in bow design reflected local materials, prey species, and cultural preferences. Arctic peoples developed different bow styles than desert dwellers. Some cultures emphasized powerful bows for large game, while others preferred lighter, faster-shooting designs for birds and small animals. This diversification of technology in response to environmental conditions became a hallmark of human adaptability. The bow also played important roles in early religious and ceremonial practices. The power to project death at a distance may have seemed almost supernatural to early peoples. Archery skills became associated with divine favor and spiritual power in many cultures. The bow's role in providing food through hunting linked it to survival and prosperity rituals. Training in archery began early in life and required years to master. This extended apprenticeship system created the first formal technical education programs in human history. Master archers passed down not only shooting techniques, but also knowledge of bow construction, arrow making, and hunting strategies. These educational traditions established patterns for technological knowledge transfer that continue today. From the evidence, we know that the bow and arrow, in a modern and developed sense, is at least 10,000 years old. We read pretty certain that arrowhead flints make archery at least 20,000 years old, and it is possible that ancient humans were shooting bows 70,000 years ago, or more. The longevity of archery as a human technology testifies to its fundamental effectiveness and adaptability. The bow and arrow represents humanity's first truly sophisticated projectile weapon system. It demonstrated that humans could master complex physics, develop specialized manufacturing techniques, and create tools that dramatically enhanced natural capabilities. From those first arrows shot in prehistoric Africa, to the composite bows of medieval warriors, to the precision equipment of modern Olympic archers, the bow and arrow remains a testament to human ingenuity and our species' relentless drive to extend our reach beyond natural limitations. Chapter 7. The birth of writing in the bustling marketplace of ancient Uruk. Around 3200 BCE, a Sumerian merchant faced a common but crucial problem. He needed to keep track of complex business transactions, how many jars of barley he had traded, how much silver was owed, and when payments were due. His remarkable memory could handle simple exchanges, but the growing complexity of urban commerce demanded something more reliable. Taking a lump of soft clay and a reed stylus, he pressed small marks into the clay's surface marks that represented not sounds or pictures, but abstract concepts like quantities and agreements. In this moment, humanity took one of its most momentous leaps forward, the invention of writing. Writing is a vanish, system of graphic marks representing the units of a specific language has been invented independently in the Near East, China, and Mesoamerica. The cuneiform script, created in Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, ca. 3200 BC, was first. It is also the only writing system which can be traced to its earliest prehistoric origin. This antecedent of the cuneiform script was a system of counting and recording goods with clay tokens. The journey toward true writing began thousands of years earlier with simple record-keeping systems. Theories abound on the origins of writing, but the first step on the journey is thought to have begun in the 9th millennium BC with the beginnings of agriculture. Numerous clay tokens have been found on excavations in the Middle East dating to this period, and these have been interpreted as counting devices, so that one coin-shaped token carved with a cross would represent one sheep. These clay tokens represented humanity's first attempt to externalize memory and make information portable and permanent. For thousands of years, these three-dimensional tokens served as a complete accounting system. Different shapes represented different commodities cones. For grain measures, spheres for certain quantities of animals, cylinders for livestock. The token system was sophisticated enough to handle complex transactions across the growing trade networks of the ancient Middle East. The revolutionary transition from three-dimensional tokens to two-dimensional writing occurred around 3200 BCE. The three-dimensional tokens were transformed into two-dimensional pictographic signs, and like the former tokens, the pictographic script served exclusively for accounting. Instead of handling physical tokens, scribes began impressing their shapes into clay tablets, creating permanent records that couldn't be lost or altered. This transition required a profound cognitive shift. The physical token, representing a sheep, became an abstract mark on clay that symbolized the same concept. This level of abstraction, using arbitrary symbols to represent real-world objects and concepts, represented a new form of human thinking that would revolutionize civilization. The earliest writing was purely practical, focused on economic transactions and administrative record-keeping. As beer was a very popular beverage in ancient Mesopotamia, many of the earliest records extant have to do with the sale of beer. These mundane commercial documents were humanity's first steps toward capturing human thought in permanent form. The limitations of early pictographic writing soon became apparent. With pictographs, one could tell how many jars or vats of beer were involved in a transaction, but not necessarily what that transaction meant. Complex relationships, conditional agreements, and temporal sequences couldn't be effectively represented through simple pictures of objects. The breakthrough that transformed writing from a simple recording system into a true language. Representation came with the introduction of phonetic elements. Phonetic signs, introduced to transcribe the name of individuals, marked a turning point when writing started emulating spoken language and, as a result, became applicable to all fields of human experience. For the first time, the full richness of human language could be captured in written form. This phonetic revolution allowed scribes to write anything that could be spoken. Personal names, which couldn't be represented pictographically, required symbols that represented sounds rather than objects. Once this principle was established, it could be extended to abstract concepts, complex grammatical relationships, and the full range of human expression. The social implications of writing were immediate and profound. Writing was of political importance to the Egyptian Empire, and literacy was concentrated among an educated elite of scribes. Only people from certain backgrounds were allowed to train as scribes in the service of temple, royal, and military authorities. This created humanity's first information-based social class people, whose power derived not from physical strength or inherited status, but from their mastery of symbolic systems. The education of scribes became a formalized process requiring years of intensive training. Professional writers of cuneiform were called tablet writers, scribes. In slow stages of schooling, they learned hundreds of cuneiform signs and memorized texts and templates in different languages. Most were men, but some women could become scribes. The curriculum included not just writing technique, but mathematics, law, literature, and religious knowledge. The democratizing potential of writing was offset by its technical complexity and the resources required for education. Students' interests and skills varied, and a proverb noted, "A disgraced scribe becomes a man of magical spells." This was a pointed reminder that less committed students might end up making an uncertain living writing common incantations, while those who persevered could become scholars with knowledge of mathematics, medicine, religious ritual, divination, laws, and mythology. writing systems developed independently in several regions, each reflecting local needs and cultural conditions. 4 independent inventions of writing are most commonly recognized in Mesopotamia c. 3400, c. 3100 BC, in Egypt c. 3250 BC, in China before c. 1250 BC, and in Mesoamerica before c. 01 AD. Each system evolved unique characteristics while serving similar fundamental purposes. Egyptian hieroglyphs represented a different approach to writing, combining pictographic, ideographic, and phonetic elements in a complex but elegant system. Of all the earliest writing systems, none are more popular or as elegant as Egyptian hieroglyphs. In fact, the Greeks thought the Egyptian symbols were so beautiful and sacred that they called them holy writing or hieroglyphs. From the Greek hiero, holy, and glypho, writing, the Chinese writing system developed along yet another path, creating a logographic system where characters represented entire concepts rather than sounds. The oracle bone script is one of the oldest writing systems that is directly related to a modern written language, dating back to around 1250 BCE, but most likely was first used much earlier. Oracle bone script represented archaic Chinese, which is the oldest attested stage of the Chinese language. The invention of the alphabet represented the next major breakthrough in writing technology. The invention of the alphabet about 1500 BC ushered in the third phase in the evolution of writing in the ancient Near East. The first alphabetic writing was developed by workers in the Sinai Peninsula to write West Semitic languages c. 1800 BC. In the context of cultural exchanges between Semitic-speaking people from the Levant and communities in Egypt, the alphabet was revolutionary because it reduced the number of symbols needed for complete literacy from hundreds or thousands to fewer than 30. This earliest alphabet was a complete departure from the previous syllabaries. It consisted of a set of 22 letters, each standing for a single sound of voice, which, combined in countless ways, allowed for an unprecedented flexibility for transcribing speech. The psychological impact of writing cannot be overstated. For the first time in human history, thoughts could exist independently of the thinker. Ideas could survive their creators, be transmitted across vast distances, and accumulate over centuries. Writing created humanity's first external memory system, allowing knowledge to grow beyond what any individual could remember. The rise, fall, and rediscovery of cuneiform illustrates writing's power to preserve and transmit knowledge across millennia. In the 1800s and 1900s, archaeological excavations revealed thousands of cuneiform documents, and the variations of the script across languages and time were slowly deciphered. While we can read cuneiform documents today, the majority, many hundreds of thousands, still survive unread, waiting to reveal their secrets. Writing also transformed human consciousness in subtle but profound ways. The ability to examine thoughts visually on a written surface enabled new forms of logical analysis and abstract reasoning. Complex arguments could be constructed, revised, and refined in ways impossible with purely oral communication. This enhanced analytical capability accelerated the development of philosophy, mathematics, and science. The earliest literary texts emerged about a millennium after writing's invention, suggesting that it took time for humans to realize writing's full creative potential. Scholars have disagreed concerning when written record-keeping became more like literature, but the oldest surviving literary texts date from a full millennium after the invention of writing. The earliest literary author known by name is Enheduanna, who's credited as the author of a number of works of Sumerian literature, including Exaltation of Ananna in the Sumerian language during the 24th century BC. The creation of permanent records enabled the development of complex legal systems. Historical documentation and institutional memory that could persist across generations. Laws could be written down and consulted, creating consistency and precedent impossible with purely oral traditions. Historical events could be recorded for posterity, allowing later generations to learn from past experiences. Writing also facilitated long-distance communication and administration. Complex instructions could be sent across vast distances without the risk of misunderstanding inherent in oral transmission. This capability was crucial for managing large territories and complex bureaucracies. The growth of writing paralleled the emergence of the first great empires and complex states. From those first accounting marks on Sumerian clay tablets to the digital text that surround us today, writing remains humanity's most powerful tool for preserving, transmitting, and manipulating information. The invention of writing didn't just change how humans communicated, it changed how we think, learn, and understand ourselves and our world. Chapter 8. Pottery and the Art of Fire. 20,000 years ago, in a cave in southern China, a potter knelt before a carefully tended fire, watching as flames licked around a crude clay vessel. The transformation happening before their eyes seemed almost magical. Soft, pliable earth hardening into something permanent, waterproof, and useful. This potter was participating in one of humanity's first chemical revolutions, using controlled fire to fundamentally alter the molecular structure of matter and create something entirely new. Although pottery was formerly thought to have begun with the Neolithic around 10,000 years ago, scientists in China discovered pottery fragments in the Xianrendong cave that were about 20,000 years old. This discovery pushed back the origins of ceramic technology far earlier than previously imagined, revealing that humans were experimenting with fire-hardened clay during the height of the last Ice Age. The invention of pottery represents humanity's first systematic use of chemical transformation. Fire was used in the creation of art. Archaeologists have discovered several 1 to 10-inch Venus figurine statues in Europe dating to the Paleolithic, several carved from stone and ivory, others shaped from clay and then fired. These are some of the earliest examples of ceramics, demonstrating that humans understood fire's power to permanently alter materials. Long before agriculture made pottery a necessity, the cognitive leap required for pottery making was substantial. Unlike stone tools, where the final product resembles the raw material, pottery involves a complete transformation of clay into something fundamentally different. Early potters had to understand that wet clay could be shaped, that it would dry and become fragile, and that fire would harden it into a durable, waterproof container. This process required abstract thinking about material properties and temporal sequences. The technical challenges of early pottery were formidable. Clay had to be properly prepared, often requiring the addition of temper materials like sand, crushed shell, or plant fibers that prevented cracking during drying and firing. The clay mixture needed the right consistency for shaping, neither too wet nor too dry. Vessels had to be formed carefully to avoid weak spots that would fail during firing. The firing process itself demanded precise control of temperature and atmosphere. Early pottery was likely fired in open fires or simple pit kilns, requiring careful management of fuel and airflow. Temperature had to be high enough to transform the clay, typically above 500 degrees Celsius, but not so high as to melt or warp the vessels. The potter had to understand fire behavior, fuel properties, and timing to achieve successful results. The earliest pottery served primarily utilitarian functions, but even these simple vessels represented a revolution in human capabilities. For the first time, people could store liquids reliably, cook foods in ways impossible with other containers, and create portable storage that could survive rough handling. Pottery enabled new cooking techniques that improved nutrition and food safety, particularly the ability to boil foods and create stews that made tough plant materials digestible. water storage and transport became dramatically more efficient. With pottery vessels, clay containers could hold much larger volumes than animal skins or gourds, and they didn't impart flavors or spoil as organic containers might. This improvement in water management was crucial for settled communities and enabled the storage of fermented beverages like beer, which became important both nutritionally and culturally. The development of pottery was closely linked to the agricultural revolution. During the Neolithic Age and agricultural revolution about 10,000 years ago, pottery became far more common and widespread, often carved and painted with simple linear designs and geometric shapes. Settled agricultural communities needed reliable storage containers for grain surpluses, and pottery provided the perfect solution. Food storage capabilities revolutionized human subsistence strategies. Large ceramic vessels could store grain, harvest through winter months or lean seasons, providing insurance against famine and enabling population growth. These storage capabilities were essential for the development of permanent settlements and the complex societies that emerged from agricultural communities. Pottery also enabled new forms of food processing that enhanced nutrition and created dietary variety. Fermentation vessels allowed for the production of alcoholic beverages and fermented foods that were both nutritious and culturally important. Cooking pots made it possible to prepare foods that were difficult or impossible to process otherwise, expanding the range of available food sources. The social implications of pottery were significant. Creating pottery required specialized knowledge and considerable time investment, leading to craft specialization within communities. Master potters developed expertise in clay selection, vessel forming, and firing techniques that set them apart from casual makers. This specialization was among humanity's earliest divisions of labor, based on technical skill rather than physical capabilities. Pottery production often became a communal activity, with shared kilns and firing events that brought communities together. The timing of pottery firing, which required constant attention and could affect entire batches, encouraged cooperation and shared labor. These collaborative efforts strengthened social bonds and created opportunities for knowledge sharing and cultural transmission. The decorative aspects of pottery revealed humanity's growing aesthetic sensibilities. Even the earliest pottery often featured decorative elements, patterns, textures, and designs that served no functional purpose but satisfied some deeper human need for beauty and expression. These decorations may also have served as markers of cultural identity, allowing groups to distinguish their pottery from that of others. Regional pottery styles developed early and became important indicators of cultural identity and trade relationships. Different communities evolved distinct pottery traditions that reflected local materials, cultural preferences, and technological innovations. The spread of pottery styles across archaeological sites provides evidence for trade networks, migration, patterns, and cultural exchange in prehistoric times. Pottery also played important roles in ritual and ceremonial contexts. Special vessels were created for religious purposes, burials, and important social events. The permanence of pottery made it suitable for creating objects intended to last beyond their immediate use, establishing pottery's role in humanity's first material culture traditions that connected present actions with future remembrance. The technology of pottery making drove innovations in related fields. Kiln construction led to advances in architectural techniques and understanding of combustion. The need for reliable firing temperatures encouraged experimentation with different fuels and firing methods. Potter's wheels, which appeared later in pottery's development, represented sophisticated applications of rotational motion and mechanical principles. Pottery also contributed to the development of measurement and standardization. Vessels needed to be made in specific sizes for particular purposes encouraging the development of consistent measurements and proportions. Trade in pottery goods required some degree of standardization to meet customer expectations and facilitate exchange. The chemistry of pottery making provided early insights into material transformation and the behavior of matter under extreme conditions. Observing how different clays responded to fire, how various temper materials affected finished products, and how firing conditions influenced results gave early potters empirical knowledge about materials science that would inform later technological developments. Pottery fragments, or sherds, became archaeology's most abundant and informative artifacts. Because pottery breaks easily, but the fragments are virtually indestructible, archaeological sites are often rich in pottery remains that provide detailed information about past cultures, technologies, and lifestyles. The durability of pottery has made it invaluable for understanding human history and cultural development. The geographical spread of pottery technology reveals patterns of human cultural transmission and innovation. While pottery was invented independently in several regions, techniques and styles spread rapidly through contact between communities. The adoption and adaptation of pottery making by different cultures shows humanity's capacity for technological learning and cultural exchange. Pottery production also had environmental implications that foreshadowed humanity's growing impact on natural systems. Kiln firing required substantial amounts of fuel, encouraging deforestation around pottery-producing communities. Clay extraction modified local landscapes. These environmental effects, while small compared to later industrial impacts, marked the beginning of human activities that significantly altered natural environments. The economic importance of pottery grew as societies became more complex. Pottery vessels became trade goods, with high-quality or distinctively decorated pieces traveling far from their places of origin. This trade in pottery goods was among humanity's first commercial exchanges based purely on crafted objects, rather than raw materials. Advanced pottery techniques led to increasingly sophisticated ceramic technologies. High-five ceramics, glazes, and specialized pottery types developed as potters gained greater control over materials and firing processes. These advances laid the groundwork for later ceramic innovations, including architectural ceramics, artistic pottery, and eventually industrial ceramics. The invention of pottery represents humanity's mastery of controlled chemical transformation through the application of fire. From those first experimental firings in Ice Age caves to the sophisticated ceramic technologies of today, pottery demonstrates our species' ability to understand and manipulate matter at the molecular level. Pottery didn't just give humans better containers, it opened the door to the chemical sciences and industrial technologies that would reshape the world. The legacy of those first potters extends far beyond clay vessels. Their discovery that fire could permanently transform materials established principles that underlie metallurgy, glassmaking, and countless other technologies. In learning to shape clay and transform it with fire, humanity took its first steps toward becoming masters of chemistry and material science. Chapter 9. The Invention of Clothing and Textiles in the Harsh Winds of an Ice Age Winter. Perhaps 170,000 years ago, an early human faced a life-threatening challenge. Unlike other animals, humans had lost most of their protective body hair through evolutionary adaptation to hot climates, leaving them vulnerable to cold that could kill within hours. But this individual did something no other species had ever attempted. They took the hide of a hunted animal and, using stone tools and careful planning, transformed it into a protective second skin. This moment marked humanity's first step toward conquering climate through technology rather than biological adaptation. Clothing, among anatomically modern humans in Africa, appeared between 170,000 and 90,000 years ago. Genetic evidence from Body lice suggests a range of dates centering over 100,000 years ago. The first bone scrapers appropriate for scraping hides to make supple leather were found in Morocco, dating to 90 to 120,000 years ago. This timing places clothing invention among the earliest and most crucial human technologies, appearing alongside other revolutionary innovations, like controlled fire and sophisticated stone tools. The invention of clothing represents one of humanity's most ingenious solutions to environmental challenges. We're all born naked, but most of us are forced to wear clothes shortly afterwards. Since textiles, leathers, and furs tend to disintegrate over time, scientists have had to get creative in their quest to pinpoint the origin of clothing. The archaeological evidence comes not from preserved garments, which rarely survive, but from the tools used to make them and indirect evidence of their impact. The cognitive demands of creating the first clothing were extraordinary. Early humans had to envision transforming animal hides materials that were stiff, smelly, and unsuitable for wearing into flexible, comfortable protective layers. This transformation required understanding complex sequences of processing steps: skinning, cleaning, scraping, treating, and shaping hides into wearable forms. The tools required for hide processing had to be invented specifically for this purpose. Stone scrapers with carefully shaped edges could remove fat and tissue from skins. Piercing tools were needed to create holes for binding. Sharp cutting implements allowed for shaping and tailoring. The development of specialized hide-working tools represents some of humanity's first task-specific technology, designed not for hunting or food processing, but for creating entirely new categories of objects. The processing of animal hides into usable clothing required extensive knowledge of organic chemistry, though early humans wouldn't have understood it in those terms. Different treatments were needed to prevent putrefaction, maintain flexibility, and achieve water resistance. Smoking hides over fires, treating them with animal brains or plant tannins, and other processing techniques all required empirical experimentation and accumulated knowledge. A stone tool from a site in Germany has traces of tanned animal skin, which suggests that humans' Neanderthal cousins were wearing hides 100,000 years ago. And a study from 2011 proposed that clothing may have originated as early as 190,000 years ago based on genetic analysis of clothing lice. This evidence suggests that clothing technology may have developed independently in different human populations, reflecting the universal importance of protection from environmental extremes. The impact of clothing on human expansion across the globe cannot be overstated. Garments certainly helped humans to compensate for lost body fur and to move into colder climates. Without clothing technology, humans might have remained confined to warm climates, never expanding into the temperate and Arctic regions that would become centers of innovation and cultural development. Clothing effectively extended human habitable range from tropical and subtropical zones to virtually every environment on Earth. The social implications of clothing were equally transformative. As archaeological evidence of jewelry can attest, humans have also been adorning their bodies for decorative purposes for a very long time. Among the oldest surviving pieces of jewelry are 82,000-year-old pierced shells covered in red pigment from a cave in Morocco and a 130,000-year-old eagle claw necklace found in a Neanderthal cave in Croatia. Clothing and adornment became intertwined as expressions of identity, status, and cultural affiliation. The Tarkan dress, discovered in Egypt and now in the collection of the Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology, is at least 5,100 years old, but that makes it pretty recent. Clothes actually date back much further, but the archaeological record becomes increasingly sparse as we go back in time. The perishable nature of organic materials means that most evidence for early clothing comes from indirect sources: tools, artwork, and skeletal remains that suggest clothing use. The development of textile technology marked another revolutionary advancement in human material culture. Manufacturing industry had its origin in the New Stone Age, with the application of techniques for grinding corn, baking clay, spinning and weaving textiles, and also, it seems likely, for dyeing, fermenting, and distilling. The earliest evidence of weaving comes from impressions left in clay ceramics, indicating that textile production was well established by the Neolithic period. Spinning, the process of creating continuous thread from short fibers, required the invention of specialized tools and techniques. Early spindles, often just weighted sticks, allowed humans to twist plant or animal fibers into strong, continuous threads. This technology transformed abundant but otherwise unusable materials like plant stems, animal hair, and cotton into the raw materials for sophisticated textiles. Weaving represented an even more complex technological achievement. The interlacement of perpendicular threads to create fabric required understanding of structural principles, pattern creation, and mechanical systems. Early looms, even simple frame looms, represented sophisticated tools that could produce textiles, far superior to sewn-together pieces of hide or fur. The variety of materials that could be processed into textiles expanded human options dramatically. Plant fibers from flax, hemp, cotton, and other sources provided lightweight, comfortable materials suitable for warm climates. Animal fibers like wool offered superior insulation for cold conditions. The ability to select and combine different materials allowed clothing to be optimized for specific environments and purposes. Dyeing technology, which developed alongside textile production, reveals humanity's growing mastery of chemical processes and aesthetic sensibilities. All these incipient fields of specialization, moreover, implied developing trade between different communities and regions. And again, the archaeological evidence of the transfer of manufactured products in the later Stone Age is impressive. The creation of colored textiles required knowledge of plant and mineral dyes, mordants to fix colors, and processing techniques to achieve desired results. The social stratification that accompanied clothing development was profound. Fine textiles became markers of wealth and status, requiring significant labor investment and specialized knowledge to produce. The oldest piece of woven cloth found so far was in Cataluyuk, Turkey, and dated to about 9,000 years ago. Even these early examples show sophisticated techniques and decorative elements that went far beyond mere utility. Clothing also played crucial roles in ritual and ceremony. Special garments were created for religious purposes, life transitions, and important social events. The permanence and beauty of fine textiles made them suitable for expressing cultural values and maintaining traditions across generations. Burial goods often included elaborate clothing, suggesting that garments had significance beyond immediate practical use. The labor organization required for textile production drove social innovation. Spinning and weaving were time-intensive activities that benefited from specialization and division of labor. Communities developed systems for organizing textile production, distributing raw materials, and sharing finished goods. These organizational innovations provided models for later industrial and economic systems. Rope and cords, closely related to textile technology, provided crucial capabilities for toolmaking and construction. 32 to 28 key, rope and cords for hafting, stone tools, weaving baskets, or sewing garments, according to archaeological evidence. The ability to create strong, flexible cordage enabled the construction of complex tools, shelters, and transportation devices that would have been impossible otherwise. Clothing technology also drove innovations in related fields. Needles for sewing required sophisticated tool-making techniques and very fine motor skills. Pattern making and garment construction required understanding of three-dimensional geometry and human anatomy. These cognitive skills transferred to other areas of human activity, contributing to overall technological advancement. The psychological impact of clothing may have been as important as its practical benefits. Wearing constructed garments rather than simple animal skins marked humans as creators and shapers of their environment, rather than mere users of natural materials. This transformation of identity may have contributed to the innovative mindset that characterizes human technological development. Climate adaptation, through clothing technology, established patterns that would define human responses to environmental challenges. Rather than evolving biological adaptations to new environments, humans increasingly relied on technological solutions that could be developed, refined, and transmitted culturally. This technological approach to environmental adaptation became a defining characteristic of human evolution. Trade networks for textile materials and finished goods were among humanity's earliest long-distance commercial systems. Fine textiles could be transported over great distances without spoiling, making them ideal trade goods. The demand for exotic materials and skilled craftsmanship drove exploration, cultural exchange, and economic development that connected distant communities. The environmental impact of clothing production presaged later industrial effects. Large-scale textile production required significant quantities of raw materials, processing chemicals, and fuel for various stages of manufacture. Even in prehistoric times, intensive textile production could affect local ecosystems through harvesting of plant materials and processing activities. Clothing and textile technology established human mastery over fibrous materials that would eventually extend to countless applications beyond personal dress. From the sails that powered early maritime exploration to the ropes and cables that enabled construction and transportation, textile technology provided foundations for much later technological development. The regional diversity of clothing and textile traditions created some of humanity's richest cultural expressions. Different environments and available materials led to distinctive styles, techniques, and aesthetic traditions that became markers of cultural identity. These regional variations demonstrate humanity's remarkable ability to adapt technological solutions to local conditions while maintaining the fundamental principles that make clothing effective. From those first, processed animal hides worn by Ice Age humans to the sophisticated synthetic textiles of today, clothing technology represents humanity's ongoing conquest of environmental limitations through ingenuity and craftsmanship. The invention of clothing didn't just protect human bodies from the elements. It enabled our species to inhabit every continent and climate on Earth, establishing technology rather than biology as the primary means by which humans adapt to new challenges. Chapter 10. Early boats and navigation on a misty morning 50,000 years ago. Somewhere along the coast of Southeast Asia, a group of early humans stood at the water's edge, gazing across a stretch of ocean toward distant land barely visible on the horizon. The journey they contemplated had never been attempted by any land-dwelling species in Earth's history. No creature had ever deliberately constructed a vehicle to carry itself across open water to unseen shores. Yet, within hours, these pioneers would push their crude but ingenious watercraft into the waves and embark on humanity's first great maritime adventure. Another major early human invention was the boat. Developed between 40,000 and 700,000 years ago, they would expand mankind's horizons. Evidence of early human settlements in Australia 40,000 years ago, Crete 130,000 years ago, and Flores, Indonesia 700,000 years ago appear to indicate that our early ancestors must have developed some form of transportation over water. The ability to cross water barriers marked a crucial turning point in human expansion and demonstrated remarkable confidence in technological solutions to seemingly impossible challenges. The cognitive leap required for boat construction was extraordinary. Unlike other early technologies that improved upon existing biological capabilities, boats enabled humans to do something completely outside the realm of natural human ability: travel efficiently across water. Early boat builders had to envision vessels that could support human weight while remaining buoyant, stable, and controllable in an alien, three-dimensional environment. The earliest boat designs likely emerged from observations of natural floating objects. Fallen logs, bundles of reeds, and inflated animal skins all demonstrated that certain objects could support weight on water. However, transforming these observations into functional watercraft required understanding principles of buoyancy, stability, and hydrodynamics that had no obvious parallels in terrestrial experience. Whatever the case, the first definitive evidence of early boats, called the Pesque canoe, dates to only around 8,000 years ago. This ancient dugout canoe, discovered in the Netherlands, represents sophisticated woodworking technology that required specialized tools, extensive labor, and deep understanding of wood properties. The creation of dugout canoes involved controlled use of fire to hollow out tree trunks, followed by careful shaping and finishing to create seaworthy vessels. The technical challenges of early boat construction were formidable. Dugout boats at Kieraki Stone Age Center demonstrate the precision required to hollow out massive tree trunks without compromising structural integrity. Boat builders had to select appropriate trees, remove wood efficiently while maintaining strength, and create hulls with proper shape for stability and performance. These skills required years of experience and represented some of humanity's most sophisticated early craftsmanship. Reed boats represented an alternative approach to early watercraft construction. Instead of hollowing solid wood, reed boat builders learned to bind together bundles of buoyant plant materials into hull shapes that could support human passengers. This technology required different skills, understanding of plant materials, binding techniques, and bundle construction, but could produce seaworthy vessels without access to large trees. The psychological impact of early boating cannot be underestimated. Venturing onto water in a constructed vessel required extraordinary confidence in human technological capability. Early mariners had to trust their lives to artificial constructions in environments where human survival instincts provided little guidance. This willingness to rely completely on technology rather than biological adaptation marked a crucial psychological transition in human development. Navigation techniques developed alongside boat construction as early mariners learned to find their way across open water. Just as they had to invent ways to track time, so too did humans have to figure out how to represent space so that they could navigate their world. The 14,000-year-old stone tablets from Abans cave in Spain are thought to depict mountains, rivers, and ponds intersected with routes and hunting game plans, possibly representing some of humanity's earliest maps. Coastal navigation likely preceded open ocean voyaging as early mariners learned to read shoreline features, water conditions, and atmospheric signs. Following coastlines provided reference points and emergency landing sites, while allowing gradual development of seamanship skills. This coastal navigation required detailed knowledge of local geography, seasonal patterns, and weather conditions. The development of celestial navigation represented a quantum leap in human technical capability. Learning to use sun positions, star patterns, and lunar cycles for navigation required systematic observation, record keeping, and mathematical thinking. Early navigators had to develop mental models of celestial mechanics accurate enough to guide travel across vast distances of open water. Island-hopping voyages across the Pacific Ocean demonstrate the remarkable sophistication early maritime technology achieved. These journeys required not only seaworthy vessels, but also navigation techniques capable of finding small islands across thousands of miles of ocean. The successful settlement of islands throughout the Pacific Basin testifies to maritime technologies and navigation skills, rivaling those of much later historical periods. The social organization required for early maritime expeditions was complex and unprecedented. Ocean voyaging demanded coordinated group efforts involving vessel construction, provisioning, navigation planning, and crew coordination. These expeditions required levels of cooperation, leadership, and resource management that established patterns for later exploration and colonization efforts. Maritime technology enabled trade and cultural exchange on scales previously impossible for terrestrial societies. Seagoing vessels could transport larger loads over greater distances than land-based transport, making long-distance trade economically viable. Coastal and island communities could maintain contact across water barriers that would have completely isolated land-based groups. The environmental challenges of maritime travel drove continuous technological innovation. Different water conditions, from calm lakes to turbulent ocean swells, required different vessel designs and handling techniques. Early boat builders developed specialized designs for different environments: shallow draft vessels for rivers, stable designs for open water, and fast hulls for coastal travel. Fishing technology developed alongside boats as watercraft enabled access to marine resources unavailable to shore-based populations. Deep water fishing required not only seaworthy boats but also specialized equipment: nets, hooks, lines, and processing techniques. The protein-rich marine resources accessible through maritime technology may have supported population growth and cultural development in coastal regions. Weather prediction and seasonal planning became crucial maritime skills as early mariners learned to read atmospheric and oceanic conditions. Understanding wind patterns, storm signs, and seasonal weather changes was essential for safe travel. These observational skills contributed to early meteorological knowledge and long-term environmental awareness. Boat maintenance and repair required specialized knowledge and tools that extended maritime capabilities. Understanding how to patch holes, replace worn components, and modify vessels for different purposes kept boats functional over extended periods. These maintenance skills were particularly crucial for long-distance voyages where repairs might be needed far from home bases. The material science involved in early boat construction pushed the boundaries of available technology. Waterproofing techniques using plant resins, animal fats, and natural adhesives required chemical knowledge. Selection of wood types for different applications demanded understanding of material properties. Rope and binding technologies needed for boat construction drove innovations in fiber processing and cordage manufacture. Regional variations in boat design reflected local materials, water conditions, and cultural preferences. Arctic kayaks optimized for ice navigation differed dramatically from tropical outrigger canoes designed for coral reef environments. These regional specializations demonstrate humanity's remarkable ability to adapt technological solutions to diverse environmental challenges. The role of boats in warfare and conflict added another dimension to maritime development. War canoes required different design priorities than fishing or transport vessels: speed, maneuverability, and capacity for weapons and warriors. Naval warfare tactics developed alongside vessel technology, creating feedback loops that drove continuous improvement in both areas. Ceremonial and ritual uses of boats reflected their cultural significance beyond mere transportation. Boat burials, ceremonial vessels, and maritime religious practices indicate that boats held symbolic meaning related to life transitions, spiritual journeys, and connections between different realms of existence. These cultural dimensions of Maritime technology reinforced its importance in early human societies. The economic impact of early maritime technology was transformative for coastal and island communities. Access to marine resources, participation in water-based trade networks, and ability to exploit previously inaccessible territories provided economic advantages that could support larger populations and more complex societies. Maritime communities often develop differently from purely terrestrial ones. Load carrying capacity, improvements offered by water transport were revolutionary compared to land-based alternatives. While a person might carry 30 to 40 pounds walking, overland, even a small boat could transport several times that amount with less energy expenditure. This multiplication of transport capacity enabled surplus accumulation, trade development, and resource specialization. Impossible with purely terrestrial transport. The knowledge systems required for successful maritime activity became some of humanity's most sophisticated pre-scientific technologies. Navigation, weather prediction, vessel construction, and seamanship required systematic observation, knowledge transmission, and continuous refinement across generations. Maritime cultures developed some of the world's most complex oral traditions for preserving and transmitting technical knowledge. Safety techniques and emergency procedures developed alongside maritime technology as early mariners learned to manage the unique risks of water travel. Understanding how to handle vessel emergencies, survive in water, and signal for assistance became crucial skills. These safety technologies and practices established precedents for risk management in later technological endeavors. The environmental impact of early maritime activity was relatively minimal, but established patterns that would become significant as technology scaled up. Harvesting of materials for boat construction, modification of coastal environments for harbors and launching sites, and pressure on marine resources from improved fishing technology all prefigured later environmental effects of human maritime activity. From those first tentative ventures across narrow waterways to the sophisticated vessels that carry modern global commerce, maritime technology represents humanity's conquest of Earth's water barriers. Early boats didn't just enable travel across water, they opened entire new realms of human possibility, connecting isolated populations, enabling resource exploitation, and demonstrating that human ingenuity could overcome seemingly absolute natural barriers. The invention of boats established water as a highway rather than a barrier, fundamentally changing how humans understood and interacted with their planet. These early vessels carried more than passengers and cargo. They carried human civilization itself to new shores, spreading innovations, cultures, and possibilities across the globe in ways that continue to shape our interconnected world today. As we stand at the dawn of a new age surrounded by smartphones that contain more computing power than entire space programs, connected to a global network that spans continents, and on the verge of establishing permanent settlements on other worlds, it's remarkable to consider how far we've traveled from those first sparks controlled by human hands hundreds of thousands of years ago. That each invention we've explored today represents more than just a technological breakthrough. Fire, stone tools, agriculture, the wheel, language, the bow and arrow, writing, pottery, clothing, and boats, these weren't isolated discoveries, but interconnected revolutions that built upon each other, creating cascading changes that fundamentally transformed what it meant to be human. Consider the extraordinary web of connections between these ancient innovations. Fire didn't just provide warmth and protection, it enabled cooking, which made possible the enhanced nutrition that fueled brain growth. That larger brain capacity, in turn, enabled the abstract thinking necessary for language development. Language allowed for the precise communication needed to teach complex skills like advanced stone tool making. Stone tools enabled the processing of plant and animal materials necessary for clothing and shelter construction. Agriculture required all of these previous innovations working together. Fire for land clearing, tools for cultivation, language for coordinating seasonal activities, and storage containers made possible by pottery techniques. The wheel emerged from pottery-making traditions, then revolutionized transportation and mechanical systems. Writing developed from the need to track agricultural surpluses and trade. Goods moved by wheeled vehicles. The bow and arrow required the integration of multiple material technologies, stoneworking for points, woodworking for shafts, and textile techniques for binding and fletching. Boats represented perhaps the ultimate synthesis, requiring expertise in woodworking, textile technology for sails and rigging, navigation knowledge transmitted through language and writing, and the metallurgy that would later provide better tools for construction and repair. This interconnectedness reveals something profound about human innovation. We are not just tool users but system builders. While other species use simple tools, humans create complex technological ecosystems where each innovation enables and amplifies others. This systems thinking approach, first evident in how our ancestors combined fire, tools, and language to create entirely new capabilities, remains the foundation of modern technological development. The pattern established by these first great inventions continues to define our species today. Just as our ancestors used fire to expand beyond biological limitations, we use nuclear power to meet energy needs that dwarf anything our ancestors could imagine. Just as they developed stone tools to augment natural capabilities, we create artificial intelligence to extend human cognitive reach. Just as they invented agriculture to control food production, we're developing technologies to feed billions, while exploring vertical farms and lab-grown meat. The psychological transformation enabled by these early inventions may be their most lasting legacy. Each breakthrough demonstrated that human ingenuity could overcome seemingly absolute natural constraints. Fire showed that humans could control elemental forces. Tools proved that natural materials could be reshaped to serve human purposes. Agriculture revealed that natural ecosystems could be redesigned for human benefit. Language demonstrated that thoughts could transcend individual minds and become shared. Cultural resources. This growing confidence in technological solutions established what we might call the human mindset, the assumption that problems are meant to be solved, that constraints are meant to be overcome, and that the natural world is raw material for human creativity rather than an unchangeable given. This mindset, born from those first successful innovations, drives every aspect of modern civilization, from medicine to space exploration. What's most remarkable about these ancient innovations is their universality. Every human society, regardless of when or where it developed, reinvented these fundamental technologies. This suggests that the drive to innovate, to solve problems through technology rather than biological adaptation, represents a core characteristic of human nature itself. Even when populations were completely isolated for thousands of years, they independently developed fire control, stone tools, agriculture, and the other foundational technologies. Yet this universality also reveals the deep structural challenges that have always confronted human survival. The fact that every human culture developed clothing, food storage, and protective shelter reflects the universal vulnerability of our species outside of narrow environmental niches. Our technological dependence isn't a modern weakness. It's been our survival strategy from the beginning. The social implications of these early inventions establish patterns that continue to shape human civilization. Specialization, which began when some individuals became expert toolmakers or pottery crafters, created the first division of labor and social stratification based on skill rather than just physical strength. Trade networks initially developed to exchange high-quality stone or other materials, established the economic connections that would eventually span the globe. Knowledge preservation and transmission, first achieved through language and later through writing, created humanity's first information systems and educational institutions. The master-apprentice relationships that developed around complex technologies like metallurgy or textile production became the master-apprentice relationships that developed around complex technologies like metallurgy or textile production became the master-apprentice relationships that the foundation for all later systems of technical education and professional development. The cognitive revolution that enabled these first inventions: abstract thinking, planning for the future, systematic problem solving, and the ability to transmit complex knowledge across generations remains the foundation of all subsequent human achievement. Modern scientists working on quantum computers employ the same fundamental intellectual processes as those first toolmakers chipping stone cores into sharp implements. The ability to envision potential outcomes, work backward from desired results, and iteratively refine techniques through experimentation hasn't changed. Only the complexity and scale of the problems we tackle. The environmental relationship established by these early technologies also set precedents that remain relevant today. From the first controlled fires that modified local ecosystems to the agricultural practices that transformed entire landscapes, humans began reshaping the natural world to serve technological and social purposes. This interventionist approach to environmental management, controversial as it has become in the modern era, was established by our earliest innovations and remains central to human survival strategies. Perhaps most importantly, these early inventions established humanity's relationship with technology as a positive-sum game. Each innovation didn't just solve immediate problems. It opened new possibilities that previous generations couldn't even imagine. Fire led to cooking, which led to pottery, which contributed to permanent settlements, which enabled writing, which facilitated the complex knowledge systems that drive modern civilization. This recursive quality of technological development, where each advancement enables multiple new advances, continues to accelerate human capabilities at ever-increasing rates. The temporal perspective offered by these ancient innovations is equally instructive. Technologies that seem fundamental and obvious to us required thousands of years to develop and refine. The wheel, which appears conceptually simple, required sophisticated understanding of materials, engineering principles, and manufacturing techniques that took generations to perfect. This reminds us that even our most advanced current technologies, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, renewable energy systems, are likely still in their infancy, with transformative applications yet to be discovered. Today, as we grapple with artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and space exploration, we're still following paths first blazed by those ancient pioneers who refused to accept natural limitations as final answers. The first human who struck stone against stone to create a cutting-edge set in motion, a chain of innovation that continues to accelerate today. The confidence in human problem-solving ability, the willingness to experiment with new approaches, and the drive to share innovations across communities all trace back to those first successful technological breakthroughs. Looking forward, the challenges facing our species: climate change, resource depletion, space exploration, and the management of increasingly powerful technologies will require the same fundamental approaches pioneered by our ancestors. We'll need systematic observation and experimentation, collaborative knowledge development, willingness to iterate and refine solutions, and the confidence to attempt things that seem impossible. The story of human innovation is far from over. Just as those first controlled fires led to technologies their creators couldn't imagine, our current innovations are laying groundwork for possibilities we can't yet envision. The first great human inventions didn't just change how our ancestors lived. They changed the trajectory of life itself, setting our species on a path toward possibilities that are still unfolding across the cosmos. In understanding where we came from, we gain insight into where we're going and confidence that human ingenuity, creativity, and determination remain our greatest assets for navigating an uncertain but promising future.